Welcome back to More Than a Game, a podcast dedicated to the Premier League, the A-League and more. After our sprawling Premier League pod this week, we thought we'd give you a little A-League palate cleanser. So today on the show, Sydney and Ante drop twos, Alu and Derbyshire race for golden shoes, and the VUC continue to lose. I'm Colby, and fresh from his escape to Phillip Island, I'm joined by Big Data Damo. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, mate. I didn't realise you were taking up a career in poetry.
It was all I could come up with tonight, but hope the listeners appreciate it. We're also here with a listener and friend of the pod, an aspiring journo, Shanen, or should I say Shanen. Mate, welcome to the More Than a Game hot seat. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Shanen, we always ask, the very few guests that we do have on the pod from time to time, a few set questions, just to get to know you and have the listeners get to know you a bit more. So we might rip into a few of those. But just first of all, I guess, how did you get into football in the first place?
Mine's probably a bit weirder than everyone else's because, honestly, I was thinking about it and probably stems from when my nana got me FIFA 09 on the Nintendo DS. And, I hadn't really watched too much football or soccer before that. And I just got really hooked onto that game. And at the same time, it was when Channel Go was showing Bundesliga highlights and stuff like that. So yeah, just everything happened at once. I started watching the World Game with Les Murray, all because of FIFA 09 on the DS. So yeah.
Wowie. I played sensible soccer on the NES as a kid and still somehow managed to get into football. So showing my age probably there, but it was it was a pretty high tech game. All right, that's cool. And in terms of the teams that you follow, give us your favorite team. Now we're going to make you pick one. So your absolute favorite team, whether that's your club team, national team, men's, women's, you have to pick one.
Probably going to go with a boring answer and say the Socceroos. I don't really have an A-League team because I live in Bathurst. It's pretty far away from everyone else. So yeah, Socceroos, if that's not too boring for you.
That's a good answer.
Honestly, yeah. If I had gun to my head, if I had to pick an absolute favorite team out of club, country, everything, I'd probably pick the Roos as well.
Well,
tough team to support at times, but
we had when we had Ellie Menjum on the pod a while back, we really pressed it to him because obviously he has to be quite partial in what he does in the clubs he sees, and I gave him a little bit of stick and I said, I know you're a Wanderers fan, but who do you really support? And he backtracked and said, oh, just Australia, mate. I only support Australia. So you're not the first person to say the Socceroos is your favourite team as a guest.
Diplomatic answer. Very diplomatic.
Well, I could have just said that I hope all teams have a good time,
that's another good answer.
And finally, we're going to go through a couple of quick fire little questions in a bit of an underrated, overrated segment. And if you or any listeners have got a better name for this little segment, let's have it. But for now, it's underrated or overrated. We'll start off with the A-League.
How descriptive do I give the answer? Just one word, or
no? You can go more. Give us some info.
Very underrated. It's the best league in the world. Where else will you see people fixing their own nets, people getting clotheslined and not getting sent off? It's really good. People who aren't watching it are missing out.
And people who come to it as well. I've seen so many people, including a couple of listeners to the pod, who've started watching the A-League in the past couple of years, and it's just great to see people just discovering it for the first time. I'm almost a little bit jealous in a way because there's just so much good stuff there to get into. Underrated or overrated, the Premier League?
Overrated, definitely. It's the technical. The player's technical ability is really good, but sometimes it's just like watching grass grow,
It's like a midday soap opera sometimes, the Premier League.
Yeah. They're a lot more physical than I remember. I was watching a match the other day and they were just kicking the absolute, crap out of each other.
Yeah, for all the stuff you hear about modern football and players are protected, and if you really watch closely a game, they still get knocked around. Particularly like this, the sort of smaller, trickier players still like cop heaps. It's not like the Maradona days of getting absolutely hacked, but like they still cop a bit.
Yeah.
All right. What about Ryan Grant's former mullet? Now that it's gone, we just need true opinions.
I didn't like it, but now that I've seen him without it, I kind of dig it. Like, it kind of suited him. Seeing him without it, he just looks like a 60-year-old man now. So yeah, I dig it. Rate it.
Is that meant to be a dig at Damo?
Yeah, because I look like Ryan Grant right now.
Another visual gag that we lost on many listeners to the pod. But if any listeners want to jump onto YouTube and get onto our YouTube streams, which drop before our podcasts, you can see Damo, or Ryan Grant's doppelganger, as we'll now be referred to.
Hey, I'm Ryan Grant this week. I was Angelino about a month ago.
Yeah, well, it was a bit shorter back then. Now it's Ryan Grant doesn't seem to have gone all the way to the skin. So. All right, and finally, big name players, including current and ex-Socceroos, coming back to the A-League.
Probably overrated. Like a lot of them who come over, they come over when they're ready for the retirement home. They don't take the league too seriously, and they just make absolute fools of themselves. Like, look at William Gallas. For some reason, he thought it would be a good idea to go from London to Perth. His first game was like a 40-degree day, and like he nearly died out there, to be honest. So yeah,
I think a few of them do get found out with the heat. It'll be interesting when and if A-League officially does make the switch to winter, how different it is, especially for the foreign players to sort of adjust and things like that. But yeah, that's one thing that really does seem to catch them out. And just finally, before we get into the match reviews, you and I have been chatting a bit throughout the week, and you've dropped a little breadcrumb in our chat about your Indian Super League TV appearances. I really want to hear a bit more about this, so I decided to save this topic for the pod. But why don't you tell us a bit about that?
I'll start with the Australian appearance I went on. I'm not going to name the name of the show, but I'm sure people can probably figure out what it was. So it was like
Indian
an NSL
Super League
show.
Fans out there can look it up.
It was like an NSL show, and the guy asked me to be on to talk about the Indian Super League. During the show, he forgot my phone number, so I was expecting a phone call from him, and I got nothing. So I had to text him. And he like started calling me Chai Latte about 50 or 60 times, which sounds nothing like my name. And then like there was just some racist comments saying like Indians should stick to Uber Eats and 7-Eleven, and like some of the questions he asked me, he did no research. He was just asking me some stupid questions. Like he said, name all the teams in the Indian Super League, and I was just like, okay, that's going to be interesting. Listening to me list like 10, 12 teams, and yeah, it was just like it was a nightmare. He had me on the phone too, and he had like some I don't know what the word is, but it was some radio thing where it makes sound effects. Oh. And he kept pressing that every couple of seconds. So it was playing like music and like a laugh soundtrack when I was trying to listen to him. So I had to guess what he was saying. And yeah, like for the actual Indian TV, the first time I went on there, I didn't actually realize I was like going on, because I'm in Indian Super League groups on Facebook. And one of the guys who runs one of the channels sent me a message, and he said, hey man, do you want to like have a chat to me on the phone about some of the A-League players and stuff coming to the Indian League? And I was like, yeah, no worries. And yeah, it turns out it was just like the TV, and he was just asking me questions, so that caught me a bit off guard. Some of the like opinions I had on the A-League weren't the best. Like one of the things that made me laugh in particular was when they were saying Jacob Tratt was one of the best defenders in the league. And I was like, okay, like who? I understand Roy Krishna being like one of the best players to come over there, but he was going on about Jacob Tratt for about 10, 15 minutes. Yeah, so it's a bit of a weird like landscape talking to these people, because they like must have just looked at the A-League on like Wikipedia or something, and then like talked about some of the players. And yeah, some of the questions they were asking me were a bit bizarre.
That is very bizarre. I can't say that I've ever watched any Indian Super League, so I can't really comment on the status of that league. But all I see are just like shorts of Robbie Fowler presses where he's like blowing up at some journo, and I just like have a wry chuckle to myself. But that's basically the start and end of my knowledge about the Indian Super League, other than how many Aussies seem to go over there for short stints.
Yeah, like the quality's not too bad, I'm not going to lie, but it's not better than the A-League. It's probably between MPL and A-League. But yeah, so it's like some of the journos over there, the research they were doing, like I don't want to be rude to them, but yeah. There was a rumor about Jack Clisby coming over to one of the teams. I got asked a question. He heard Jack Clisby was like the Gareth Bale of the A-League.
All right, that's sticky. And Jack Clisby is the Gareth Bale of the A-League. He's washed up.
Funnily enough, this season he changed his number from 3 to 11, so maybe he heard that and just, went to his head. He's actually been doing pretty good this season, so maybe
he actually has been doing pretty well this season. I think he's up there for like chances created and crosses into the box and stuff like that. So he's certainly getting forward.
He's more effective. He's more effective in the A-League than Bale has been for about 3 years in any league. So.
Well, there we go. Clisby is the Bale of the A-League, confirmed.
There you go.
You heard it here first. Well-researched opinions coming at you from more than a game. Coming up next, the Bunnings A-League Match Week 9. All right, boys. So the weekend kicked off with Adelaide hosting Central Coast Mariners, and I figured why not start there. The Mariners held on to top spot despite the best efforts of Kurt Ams and the VAR to derail their run. Damo, let's start with you. What the hell happened?
I don't know. Like on any other day, none of those would be penalties. That there's soccer Twitter obviously with reason was blowing up saying Adelaide were gifted the game, but no, it's one of those things. The decisions kind of fall your way at home, and they were soft, but they had to go. And we've been complaining about VAR all season. They have to go with the call on the field if there's no conclusive evidence to overturn it. And those ones were all just bad calls from the referee in the center of the field.
Shanen, what do you think about the calls? All of them pretty bad in your view, or any that you'd sort of stick with?
Yeah, they were all pretty bad. And I, like many people at home, was confused as to why it was taking, particularly the first one, it was taking minutes of him, with his finger to his ear, listening to the ref, why he didn't just go over to the screen and have a look at it rather than stopping the game for a few minutes. That was just weird. And yeah, like to have that many bad calls go against you in one half, I don't know what the Mariners did. They might have stepped on a leprechaun or something, because that's just shocking.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one, I think, where the ref's talking to the VAR doesn't go to the screen. Weird. VAR, you'd think, should have at least recommended he go to the screen. But then the second one looked a bit soft, and the ref just seemed to get that one wrong in the first instance. But then VAR didn't do anything about it. So it's like the way I sort of saw it. It just doesn't. It was sort of like the ref and the VAR making mistakes, but both of those mistakes just compounded into one like clusterfuck of mistakes, and just turned into just like a farce of a game. And then in terms of the Kai Rolls one at the end, where he's sort of diving down to block that shot and gets a handball, it's sort of like, okay, you can see those ones given, and if that's a goal in a regular game that doesn't have all that like stuff ups before it, then you might go, oh, okay, well, those just sort of happen. But yeah, to the fact that you had that one on top of it, I just made it, really, really interesting, especially if you're a Mariners fan. Jack McDonald on Facebook wants to know, boys. He says the Central Coast Mariners daylight robbery. How can Stajic get booked for standing up? Meanwhile, Rue gets a yellow for nearly decapitating a player.
I think you should get a yellow card for your pronunciation of Alan's name there. Maybe we should get Speedy on the pod to get it right for us.
I can't get it quite right. I think I need to listen to Speedy a few more times. Although, if you were listening during this game, on the goal, he was shouting and he said Stajic, and then corrects it to Stajic or whatever he said the pronunciation really was. So I did hear him pick himself up during the game, but he's not quite got as tight a handle on it as he'd have you believe. Yeah, so I mean, it's just ridiculous inconsistency across some of these games. But the you would have seen, boys, that the APL director of refs, Streb Dolovsky, came out and admitted that the officials got it wrong, and there was a big write up in the Sydney Morning Herald about it, and said, basically just issued an apology and said the refs are going to get extra training. But Shanen, is this good enough?
Oh well, obviously not. Before we move on to the subject of VAR, what about when he was checking out the screen, how they were playing Jeopardy music in the background? What was that? It
didn't
just
mind
made
that.
a laughable situation even worse.
It's just peak A-League, right?
Yeah.
Adds to the effect.
Exactly, to the point why the A-League's so underrated. What other league in the world would you get that? You know?
Yeah, that was a nice touch, I thought.
Colby, talking about Streb Dolovsky and how, he said that the refs got it wrong and the VAR got it wrong. And I mean, the fallout of that was Greg O'Rourke then making a statement saying that, the A-League isn't necessarily tied in with VAR. We have no obligation to keep it. It's circulating these rumors that maybe the A-League are going to get rid of VAR. And it's been...
What's Greg thinking, saying stuff like that, though? That's just it opened a giant can of worms.
He's trying to be too much like Peter Volandis, and who's the AFL bloke. He wants to be the face of the league. I'm like, just go and do your job, Greg. Sit back, do your job, stay out of the limelight, and it'll be better for you.
Yeah, because I feel like with some of these things, he likes to be like good dad. He likes to come in and be like, Dr. No Needles, good dad. I'm only coming in with the good news and all these things that are sort of the fans want to hear. But then my worry is that he won't be able to back a lot of them up, or he won't be able to deliver on a lot of them, and it'll come back to bite him.
Yeah, he's shooting himself in the foot with a few comments that he's making.
Yep. But just in terms of this result, right? The Mariners are flying. They're still sitting in first. They're still 4 points ahead of Brisbane and MacArthur. But what does a result like this do to the Mariners?
I mean, I think it just kind of but no, it doesn't. I was going to say it brings them back to kind of a back to earth sort of thing, but it doesn't, because I don't think the Mariners are outplayed. I think they still deserved points, if not all 3 points from that game, from the way they played against Adelaide. And like you said, they're still 4 points clear. I actually don't think this changes much in terms of moving forward, apart from maybe more of a motivation to say, well, look, we are better than you're giving us credit for.
I think it's actually going to give them a boost, because the fact that they could have a game where they had so much go against them and still come out with a point, that's going to give them a huge amount of confidence going forward. People have been wondering when the Mariners are going to stop this run of form. This really shows that they're here to play. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they got back into the game at 2 points during this. I don't know. I forget exactly which way the score fell, but I mean, they were right in it. And like you said, Damo, they probably created the better of the chances. And yeah, if it wasn't for all of these VAR involved penalties and the like, they would have won the game and kept going. But I think they've been on enough of a run now that there's a bit of genuine belief there, and I don't think something like this will take the wind out of their sails. And in fact, like Shanen was saying, I think it'll probably galvanise them. But we got to move on, boys. The Woo showed that there is life at Mars after snapping their losing drought there in style with a 4-1 win to mince the Mac Bulls. Shanen, just this scoreline, is this a bit flattering for the Woo, or are they back?
I actually don't think they were too much better than MacArthur on the night. I think it was one of those scorelines, as like Jose Mourinho says, that was a false scoreline. They did play well, but the difference between them and MacArthur is they had their chances and they just took them. And MacArthur, they didn't deserve to lose 4-1, but, that's what happens sometimes in football.
And Damo, thoughts on Guadachena that I know how to pronounce, because Zappers and Archie were saying it like 50,000 times in this game. So now I know how to pronounce it, I think.
He was, I think he was one of the best, if not the best player on the field. And I'm just so disappointed that little drag back and dink that come off the post that Berisha knocked in wasn't his goal. It just would have put the nail in the coffin to really solidify how good of a game he had. But he was everywhere in that, particularly in that middle third of the park for the Woo. He was just controlling the pace of the game. I thought he was brilliant.
And how good to have a player like him and Diamante just absolutely tearing it up and just spraying it wherever they want.
What did I think Ray Gatt said? I know he's not from here, but Alessandro Diamante is a national treasure.
Tweets like that absolutely bang though, don't they? Like, I mean,
Diamante responded to him with just that little like emoji,
the prayer
hands like
this. And well, speaking of little simples, did you see Guadacena's goal celebration? The little M. Any idea what that was about?
No,
I don't know. He's celebrating with this little M. I didn't know whether it was like an upside down W or like for Woo, or maybe it was a bit of a dig at the MacArthur fans. It was Moo, or I don't know.
Maybe M for Mark Rudan.
Oh yes, big love for Rudes. Did you see the Western Service crew had a little tifo, and it said, and because this was their home game, right, at Mars in Ballarat, and their tifo said, "Fans, not customers, moo," like to the Woo fans. But I just thought that was a bit strange because like it's a dig at the incident that happened a couple of weeks ago where MacArthur were grabbing like social media headlines for charging $50 for an away ticket to the Sydney FC fans. But it was a bit odd from the Western Service crew to jump in on that because this was their home game. So like MacArthur would have been away at their home game. So it was a bit of an odd moment to put it out there, I thought.
I also feel it's a bit of an odd statement to make as a fan of Western United, who've been moved around to, I think, 6 different stadiums already in their career. Fans kind of used expendably as customers.
Yeah, just odd all around. They could do better. I've seen the Western Service crew do better in their short time. Guys, keep going. I like where your head's at, but keep it going. And Damo, we'll have a bit of a chat about MacArthur because we've got to talk about not your boy Alu, who's got in the Golden Boot running, but maybe your boy Matt Derbyshire, tied with Alu on 6 goals for the Golden Boot race. How many goals does he need before you're going to admit that you're wrong about him?
He's going to need about 20 goals.
Okay, all right. He's on track.
Look, Matt Derbyshire's played like 60 minutes of good football all season and scored 6 goals. So good on him for scoring 6 goals in 60 minutes of football. But
10 goals a minute, that's a good return, mate. That's a really good ratio.
He's still Matt Derbyshire to me.
I mean, a goal every 10 minutes, sorry, but that's pretty good. And finally, the final thing from this game obviously was Milicic. I know you saw this one, Damo, because I was telling you about it in the group chat when I was trying to explain an obscure tweet I made about it. But Shanen, did you see that when Milicic left the game with 4 minutes to go, all of social media was sort of asking questions and sort of saying, "Oh, that's a bit odd, he's like his side's copped 3 second half goals, looks like a bit of a dummy spit." But apparently he came out in the post-match presser and said the urgency for needing to leave the pitch was due to the need for a toilet break.
It wasn't a dummy spit. It was a bum spit.
Honestly,
Shanen, is that better or worse?
Pardon the pun, but I just think that's a shit excuse. When your team gets smashed like that and then all of a sudden you leave as soon as the 90 minutes are up and it's in stoppage time, and you come back later and say, I just needed to go to the toilet. Could have held it for 4 more minutes. I'm not buying that at all.
Yeah, it's a bit of a cover up, isn't it? He was like, saw that it was a bit of an unsportsman dummy spit and thought, oh look, I'll tell the people I was going for a shit instead. Like, it's like who would admit that unless it was true. But ridiculous. But another peak A-League moment. He was just chasing the toilet seat. Which is where he wants his team to be. So, he's leading from the front. Ante left that 2 at the ground, and so did Sydney, dropping 2 points to Brisbane at home at Cogra in an entertaining but frustrating encounter. Damo, robbery by Brisbane, but they haven't scored a goal now since that 5-2 against the VUC a couple of weeks back. What's wrong with Brisbane at the moment?
I don't know. I feel like they just lack a little bit of, they're not very dynamic up front, which is where they had been so good in the first, 6 games of the season. Maybe the fact that Scott McDonald now has gone down injured and looks like he might be spending an extended period on the sidelines gives a chance for Gazman to change a few things in that front third, and might see some changes, a little bit of freedom for Wenzel Halls and Danzaki, and possibly even the other Japanese bloke to come in and get some game time, who I think was playing in the NPL on the weekend.
Kudo, yeah, they're desperately trying to get minutes into him, I think, giving him a run out in the NPL. So hopefully we'll see him get up to match fitness and see what he can do, because I must admit I don't have huge faith in Golgol Mabratu to be the answer to the Roar's goal-scoring problems.
So what did you say his name was? Because I'm pretty sure Bozza called him Go-Go Mabrato.
Yeah.
Hey, Bozza was on fire this game. He had Go-Go Mabrato. What else did he say? Denzel Halls. And then and then Bobo.
Bobo.
Oh, but man, looking at that game as a Brisbane fan, like Colby and I, we spoke about it, and we're sitting there going, I'm so glad that Brisbane got a point out of that. That was hard to watch. They were getting absolutely dominated. But put yourself in the seat of a Sydney fan. You'd be so pissed off after a game like that. Sydney should have won that by 2, 3, even 4 goals they could have scored. And they couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. You ask about Brisbane's worries up front. I mean, Sydney also having goal-scoring troubles. Is Bobo going to turn it around?
I think that Jamie Young and a couple of the Brisbane defenders, Aldred and Gillespie, actually just had a ripper of a game. Like, every second Sydney fan that I saw on Twitter was just tweeting like, "Oh, every time we played Brisbane, Jamie Young just stands on his head and just has a game of his life." And I was just thinking, "Oh, that's good to be on this side of it, actually," because I think they created really good quality chances. On any other day, they would have had 2 or 3 goals in that game. And Shanen, what did you make of Brisbane's performance in this game?
I thought they were a bit, underwhelming, but I think, like, as good as Jamie Young was, Ryan Grant probably could have had 2 goals. He missed 2 pretty, simple goals, one-on-one. He hit the post twice. So maybe if he had the mullet, he would have had, the angle a bit more right. Yeah, that save by Jamie Young against Bobo was just absolutely superb. Tom Aldred was absolutely superb on one leg, and they just caused nothing up front. And to take off Wenzel Halls, or should I say Denzel Halls,
Denzel.
That early and keep
the Morton Bay Messi
McDonald on was just a bit bizarre, considering McDonald got injured straight away. They might have had a chance if they kept Wenzel Halls on.
I have nothing to base this on, but I swear that McDonald has something in his contract that says when he's fit, he plays 90 minutes or close to, because he's played almost 90 minutes everywhere. And it just makes no sense for a guy that age. I know the A-League games aren't exactly coming thick and fast like in some European competitions with cup games and the like midweek, but for a 36, 37-year-old to be playing 90 minutes every week ahead of some of the other guys in the team, it's just crazy. He's got to have something in his contract or nudes of the Gazman or something. I don't know. And so Ryan Grant should have had 2 goals. But what about the other Sydney FC players? What about Ninkovic? What did you make of him? Let's get an impartial view on Ninkovic, since we had some quite partial views going on in the comms.
I mean, Ninkovic is always good whenever he touches the ball, whenever he goes on the pitch. Even if he has a bad game, he's always been one of the best on the field. But his communication with Bobo when they come on, considering they've played together before, it was just like they just met each other, 5 minutes ago. They were just not on the same page at all. And if they had a bit more communication, Sydney probably would have scored a couple.
The most frustrating thing for me about, listening to the commentators and soccer Twitter harp on about how good Ninkovic is, vast majority of the game against Brisbane, everyone was talking about how good Ninkovic is. He's so good defensively. He keeps tracking back and getting the ball. I'm like, well, if he didn't lose the ball in the first place, there'd be no need for him to run around and chase to get the ball back that he just lost. And second of all, this is Ninkovic, who you're talking about as one of the greatest creative players in the league. Why the fuck do you want him running 60 yards back to make a tackle? That's not what you want him to do. So why are you lauding him for it? It just frustrates me.
I actually thought that Ninkovic had a pretty good game, and yeah, he's going to go down as one of the greatest imports in the league, behind Broish and maybe behind Berisha and others, but he'll be right up there. But to say like on a pretty like good performance by his own standards, like, but to just like harp on about him like he's absolutely just having a worldie, like I don't know, just a bit baffling. But yeah, that's Speed and Harper, I guess. But yeah, good escape from Brisbane. Bobo almost got himself a header. But just like the golf in quality in these two teams in terms of like who they can bring off the bench. Like there was one substitution where Sydney just did a FIFA substitution and brought on 3 players. They brought on Bratton, Bumyohan, and Bobo. And Brizzy, meanwhile, could only like put 4 on their bench or something like that, and brought on like Gol. I just was like, okay, that's the difference between these two teams. You know, they've just drifted far apart. I know Brisbane had that period where we were really successful, but they're a long way behind Sydney. Like we're playing some good football this season, but you know, as much as I want Rawsalona to be back, there's a long way to go.
I think that also is, you know, by far and away the worst Brisbane have played all season. And whether that's a result of Sydney, you know, nullifying any threat that Brisbane had, or just Brisbane not really showing up, either way, that was easily the worst game Brisbane has played this season, which, you know, coincided with the fact that Sydney had half decent game. They just couldn't put the chances away.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Onto the games that were played tonight, though. There were two games in the lead up to us recording the pod tonight, and the Wellington Western Sydney game has just finished. This was a bit of a wild one in the end, 2-2. Wellington couldn't quite get it done to get their second win of the season, so they're still sitting in 11th. Mirza Maratovic opened the scoring for Wellington with a nice little goal, and then every goal after that just came from a set piece. Like the Western Sydney one where Yeboah just headed in was the one from the training pitch, and Kamau, I was like shitting on him in our group chat, saying, how's he going to change the game? Came on and changed the game. Impact off the bench. And then Louis Ferenc Puskás Fenton off another set piece to get Wellington a point out of this. But what did you boys make of the game, Shanen?
I don't know if the Wanderers versus Wellington game was a really good game, or if I was just so like bored from the first game that any sort of half decent football seemed really good. But yeah, it was an entertaining game 2-2. I don't know what Wanderers' problem is with defending, you know, balls in the air and set pieces this season is, but I'm pretty sure they've conceded all their goals except for one from like the air. So yeah, I don't know what they need to do to fix it, but it was a good quality game of football. And those Mexican fans of Sevilla's are just absolute class too.
Yeah, where they get all the flags from? Like they must be handing them out at the stadium. Not Mexican flags, no, but the Wellington flags. They're little yellow flags. They were just like, it was like it was like a North Korean like military parade, and they were just like waving them so frantically. But they were class though. The Mexican fans that turned out for Ulysses de Villa. I love seeing stuff like that, and I think Tommy might have talked about it a couple of pods ago with Jesse when they were talking about fans of the same nationality as visa players and things coming over here, and how much you love to see it. Like we obviously saw it a couple of years ago with Honda, all the Japanese fans like coming out at everywhere he played and like following him around in training at the Victory and stuff like that. It's pretty cool to see. And Damo, what stood out in this game to you?
I only just caught the highlights for this game. I didn't. I've been busy all evening and didn't get to watch it in full. But I mean, for me, I don't know why, whether it was injury or what the cause of it was. Why Wellington? It seems like they didn't play their strongest 11. Devlin didn't start. Marinovic was on the bench. Whether they've been not playing well or they're unfit or whatever the cause of it is. I don't know. I feel like Wellington are leaving themselves a little bit short at the moment, and they have over the last probably 2 or 3 games. Whether it's you know, the way Tale's setting the team out, or what he's trying to do in terms of like a rotation with their travel and how they're all over the place. I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see their game on Tuesday night against Melbourne Victory, or Wednesday night rather against Melbourne Victory, to see not just the lineup, but the formation and actually how they go about the game, because I feel like in general they haven't done themselves any favors over the last month particularly.
That could be an early wooden spoon 6-pointer.
Could be.
Yeah, we're going to go along to that one, Damo. So yeah, it could be wild. I think we're going to play it safe and sit with the Wellington fans. So, but I thought yeah, some of the lineup choices from Wellington were a bit strange, and yeah, maybe it comes down to fitness of some players. But like Piscopo got hooked really early on, and I thought he was like almost best on ground for the Knicks. Shanen, any other observations on this one, mate?
I just thought all the changes from Wellington were absolutely justified. Hamed, for as big of a CV as he has been absolutely underwhelming. Marinovic has been pretty woeful this season. Sale come in, had an absolute blinder. Liam McGing, who's not, like, no disrespect to him, he's not by any stretch of the imagination like Paolo Maldini, but he had an absolute blinder tonight too. So every single player who come in, Muradovic as well, they had absolute cracker games. So yeah, if they had their other 11, I don't know if they would have got points from this, but yeah, they've got better depth than what I would have thought.
Well, for keeping the boys hungry. Sounds good. And just one final game from the weekend. It was the one before that. The Victory and Newey continue their unexpected renaissance via an unexpected scorer. The Port Macquarie Pele back in the goals broke his scoring drought, which I think was up to a year. I think I heard it was since 2019 that he hadn't scored a goal. It was his 50th A-League appearance, so good time to get it. He was teed up by Yule. Shanen, are Newey actually decent this season? And why has everyone else on More Than a Game podcast got this so wrong?
Well, based on tonight's game, it's really hard to tell if they were decent because I don't think anyone on the pitch for either side was good. Not to be harsh, but it just seemed like they were afraid of scoring. It seemed like they were afraid of getting the ball in the box. And, I was honest to God drifting in and out of this match. But Newey, for all the troubles they had off season, they still have some decent players in their squad. They've still got Ugarkovic for now. They've still got Topper Stanley. They've still got Thurgate. They don't have as good players as some of the other teams like Sydney or what have you. But, Central Coast Mariners don't have a good squad by any stretch of the imagination, and they're top of the league. So for people to just write off, Newcastle because they lost the Beanie and all these players and Robinson, it was just a bit short-sighted for me. I think they might actually make the 6.
Wow, yeah, that was going to be my next question. Like, where can they finish? They're into the 6 after this win now. It'd be interesting to see if they can keep that up throughout the course of the season. I'd like to see it. Always happy to be proven wrong because I'm wrong often. But I picked Newcastle, I think, to be rock bottom, and I think I picked the Mariners to come in at 11th. So very happy for those two to be having a good season. There was one player that did catch my eye, and that was young Archie Goodwin, a 16-year-old who got a debut in this game. Looked really good, almost had a goal, just put it over the crossbar a little bit, got a bit excited, but was buzzing around. I saw that I think it was Ben Homer put out a tweet that said in Archie's last season in the Vic NPL he played, which was 2019, his last full season, he listed out all of the games and how many goals he scored in them, and he got a couple of haddies. He scored 4, he scored 6, he scored 7 goals in a game. So I'm interested to see a bit more of him.
Yeah, you can't get enough of the 16, 17, 18-year-olds that have been running around the A-League this season, and I think that's why so many people were so excited for the start of this season, is to see kids like him get their chance.
And the VUC, meanwhile, are now still rock bottom of the league, and their fans are predictably going into a full-on meltdown. So much so that I'm starting to even not want to lay the boot into them, and that's really saying something. Shanen, we've talked about them a lot on this pod, and wondered what's going wrong for them, and sort of talked about it. But what's your take on why it's not really happening for the VUC this season?
It's kind of hard to put it into one sort of thing. I think there's been a lot of problems. No disrespect to Brebner, they picked the wrong manager. They've done recruitment wrong. The players they recruited were big names. Shotton's a big name. McMenamin's a big name. But all these players have had long injury histories throughout their career, and they're all getting injured at once. They're all not fit at once. Even someone who I thought was a good signing at the start of the season, Dylan Ryan, I had high hopes for him. He's an Olyaroo. He's in the youth system for Willem 2 in the Dutch league. Every game he's played, he's just been absolutely torn apart. So yeah, it's hard to put just one thing on it, but just a collective amount of disappointment. Robbie Cruz has been better this year, but like even this game, he was a bit disappointing. But he's showing passion for the club. He was absolutely filthy when he got pulled, last match. Yeah, I don't know how to put it. I wish I had the answer. If I had the answer, I would be a rich man. You know what I mean? Because Melbourne Victory are, one of the biggest clubs in the league. And last season they had the exact same thing. They signed some players that looked really good on paper. It just didn't click. This season they signed some players that look really good on paper, and it's just not clicking. So I don't know where Brebner goes from here, but yeah, I don't envy him at all. I don't think they're going to make the shift.
Brebner'd be lining up at Centrelink on Swan Street, I reckon. But to your point that the players they've signed haven't done anything. I mean, look at the players that they've got to play in the front third. They've got Ben Falami, who was a high prospect signing. Rudy Gested, who's come from a big league. They've got Robbie Cruz. And leading the line every week is little Triple L, who they've put through their academy since he's been like 12 years old. So, it's like you said, how do you put your finger on these players that you expect to perform not performing? What's going wrong at the club? Is there a cultural problem at the club? What needs to happen? Does Muscat need to come back? Is that something that is an option?
And the thing is as well, like little Triple L, who's leading the line, him, Brimmer, and young Burke and Curtar look better than all of these big name players. Like I'd be more worried as an opposition side facing those three than facing Rudy Gested, Ben Falami, and Robbie Cruz. Like if the Cruz, Falami, and Gested were the starting lineup, and I was sitting there in the away bay, I'd be much more comfortable than the other three I named. So. It's crazy, but yeah, maybe those three will go on to have a big season, and that'll be the story, and the VUC will have a bit of a resurgence with those guys. But we do have a listener question here from one of our favourite listeners, Lee Broxham Facts. He wants to know who will be Melbourne Victory and Melbourne City's managers at the end of the season, and if there is a change, who's going to be next?
I think I kind of jumped the gun there, didn't I, with my little comment?
Good segue.
Yeah. I actually think that Muscat will end up back at Melbourne Victory, but I don't think it's going to be this season. I think throwing him in the hot seat now puts too much pressure on him to try and ride out a season with bad results. They'll put him in where it's a win-win situation for him, with 5-6 games of the season to go. There's nothing expected of him, and then he can have a full preseason. That's how I see it working for Melbourne Victory, but Melbourne City, I don't really have an opinion on. What about you, Shanen?
I think people are writing off Patrick Kisnorbo too soon for City. He hasn't had the best results. He's got a very good squad. But he's done his hard yards as a manager. He's had success in the W League with youth. He's been the assistant manager. And he's coming in. It's his first time at the gig. There's a lot of pressure on the squad. There's all COVID and this sort of thing. Some new signings coming in. And they haven't played bad football. They haven't played as good football as what you would have expected, but they haven't played bad football. They just have been a little bit unlucky, and people are calling for his head already. Like, if Melbourne City don't make the top 6 and don't have a good run at the finals, I'll be very shocked because, a lot of the players believe in Kisnorbo. He's got a good group of players, and I reckon he can get the best out of them. As for Brebner, it's tough to say because I haven't really seen what he can do with a good squad because, last season, Victory were a shambles. This season, Victory are a shambles. That's not him because, Marco Kurtz had the same issues as he had, and he's had the issues. So maybe it's a cultural thing at the club where you could get, the best manager on earth come in and you couldn't get things out of these players. So it's kind of hard to say with Brebner too. It could just be a cultural thing at the club.
Yeah,
I think that's why I'm looking at Melbourne Victory thinking that Kevin Muscat's really their only option if they're trying to get it back on track, because he, over the course of however many years he was at that club, 11, 12 years in playing and coaching, he essentially was the cornerstone of what the culture of Melbourne Victory was. You know, he was the captain, he was a player, he was the coach, and he kind of kept everyone in line the whole time. Bringing him or someone like him back into the club, it's kind of like all right, everyone wake up, I'm home.
Oh, I think that's a good point, Damo. And I'd actually be really interested to see how Muskie would do at another stint back at the club, because the other point there is that when the years that Muskie was at the club, the Victory were and still are one of the biggest clubs in the league, one of the, the highest backed clubs in the league in terms of the investment that can come into the playing squad. And I always had a little bit of a feeling that perhaps that was papering over the cracks or flattering Muskie a little bit, having him be so backed financially relative to the rest of the league. And I'd be really interested to see. I think this would be a really good mark of him as a manager if he could come in under much less investment and with the squad in like the shape that it's in and actually make them really good. This would do wonders for his CV, I think, to be able to show that.
But it could also do the complete opposite, right? He could come in and with that little investment and he could do horribly, and that really ruins any future chances of him going back to Europe. Someone's not going to look at manager and go, well, you couldn't even turn that club around, and that is your club.
And just jumping back, Shanen, the other point you were making about the Melbourne City fans and Paddy Kisnorbo, we were talking on the pod a couple of weeks ago because we had a listener question about whether Melbourne City should be considered to be a big club. And I just thought, as you were saying that, oh, gee, that's like a big club thing, isn't it? Like getting, just demanding those huge results and demanding your club to be challenging and being impatient with results and the manager when it's not good enough. And, there's still a long way to go. So I actually think that's a mark of good mentality from the fans of Melbourne City, because they're holding their club to high standards and they're expecting a lot of them.
I don't know why people are saying Melbourne City isn't a big club. Melbourne Heart wasn't a big club, but the City Football Group is huge. Melbourne City have the biggest budget in the league. They have the best training facilities. They have the best youth facilities. They have the best women's team. They have like everything going for them in every aspect of like football, and people are still saying they're not a big club based on what? They are a big club,
I think,
whether or not you like it or not. They don't have the trophy case, but they're still a big club. They're qualified for Asia. They nearly won the league last season, and it's just like give it 5 years, Melbourne City is going to be consistently in the top 2 teams on the pitch in the A-League, but off the pitch, they're a big club and the fans are demanding the results based on what they should be getting, which is, absolutely right.
And to this question, Andrea S. on Twitter just suggests a manager swap. Just call it halfway point in the season and just swap them over.
Wouldn't that
sort
be
of like a coach exchange.
Yeah, it's real like MLS areas to do something like that. Hey, let's do a coach trade. I'll get to our Sal's opinion on that one.
Yeah, we've got a few American listeners. If you've got a view on whether that's MLS areas, American listeners, get at us and let us know. But that's probably going to do it for us this week. Nice quick little A-League pod. Shanen, thanks again for joining us on the pod. Listeners, let us know what you thought of Shanen's performance. Get him back on. And Damo, thanks as always, and thanks as always to everyone for listening to the pod. Get around us on social media and look for when this episode will drop. The links to all of that will be in the show note to this pod. Next week on the pod, we'll have match day 10 of the A-League and the next round of the Premier League. Until then, enjoy the football.